I have a PhD in paranoia. My job is to think ahead about what are all the potential issues in the future that you might face and then try to solve them in advance.
Welcome to The Keys to Your Legacy with your host, Elijah Keys.
Thanks so much for joining us. Today, we are joined by Michael Zwick, the self-proclaimed probate PI. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great, Elijah. How are you?
I'm doing really well. What does that mean, probate PI? I know we were talking a little bit about it before the show today, but what in the world is a probate PI?
So I'm an attorney turned private investigator, and I specialize in the field of probate, of searching for missing heirs and inheritance assets.
Okay. So what we're talking about then is somebody can't be found. There's a beneficiary or something that needs to be found after someone dies, and you're the guy to find it.
Right. Or sometimes they don't even know who the heirs are.
Yeah.
We'll take on cases where someone dies and whoever a court-appointed attorney is handling the estate doesn't know who the heirs are, or they know one side of the family, they know the maternal heirs, but not the paternal heirs, or vice versa.
Why is that important? I know why it's important, but why is that important?
It's especially important in the case where someone dies without a will, because the heirs are the people who are going to inherit. But even if they're not inheriting, according to law, they still are allowed notice of the estate. So they might want to object to a will or whatever the case might be, but by law, they're entitled to notice. So therefore, they need to be identified and located.
So you're a lawyer and I'm a lawyer, okay? And we work in the similar fields, but explain to someone who's not a lawyer what notice means.
Okay, so when an estate is opened, everybody who is what's called a party of interest to the estate is entitled to at least notice that the estate has been opened. So that includes anybody who's named as a beneficiary in the will, as well as an heir. And a lot of people think that an heir is someone who inherits, and not always gets some. You might have people who are not related who inherit under the will, or vice versa. You have people who are heirs who don't inherit. So children of the deceased are heirs. Whether they inherit or not is a different story, but they are still heirs at law. The heirs at law tend to be the closest relatives to the deceased.
So the heirs are the people who will receive something if there is no will or trust, right?
Correct.
And the next of kin would be the word in a hospital. But what you're saying is that your job is to find people and make sure that the family members are properly notified so that they can enforce the rights if they want to. And if they don't want to enforce the rights, that's okay. But at least they've been given the opportunity to bring some sort of a claim or objection or just not do anything, right?
Correct. Although the bulk of our work is finding beneficiaries who are getting inheritance, they just don't know about it. Because courts are going to be a lot more lenient in terms of giving notice to heirs who are not getting anything. Oftentimes courts will just say maybe publish notice in the local newspaper. But if they're beneficiaries, it creates all these a mess, not only giving notice, but also later on of wrapping up the estate and what do you do with their money if they haven't come forward to claim it.
Interesting thing about that, I think the word that you probably work with every single day is consanguinity, which is if you look at a life insurance policy, a life insurance chart, consanguinity is this word that talks about how people are related, right? So your first cousin is a grandchild of your grandparents, and a second cousin is a great grandchild of your grandparents, but your second cousin is the first cousin once removed, blah, 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 all these things. It goes on in variable and goes on so far. But I remember we held an event for my company. We showed up at like a family event and we had a chart like on the side of the booth and it said consanguinity chart. And we had all the little stickers like with Velcro on the back. And it said, these are your parents, these are your children, these are your grandchildren. And then it talked about how is this person related to you? And then we gave the kids prizes when they got it right. It was really boring.
Yeah, I have people who will say to me, just like friends, say, okay, explain to me the difference between a second cousin and a first cousin once removed.
They are the same thing.
So for me, I've always been able, even before I get into this, I've always been pretty much able to map it out in my head and see how people are related to each other. But not everybody has that gift.
Yeah. It's not just a gift. It's whether people actually want to understand this kind of archaic sort of way of viewing families. Because when you think about cousins, you think about heirship, you're like, if you're the Queen of England, you have to understand who like the heir is like 7 steps down. But do you really have to know who the heir is 7 steps down? And I remember speaking to clients even today, and them saying, "Hey, look, this doesn't this is simple. I want my things to go to this one person." And the answer is, I totally get that. What if they're gone? What if the next person is gone? What if the next person is gone? And I like to tell clients that I have a PhD in paranoia. My job is to think ahead about what are all the potential issues in the future that you might face, and then try to solve them in advance. I can't solve everything. I mean, somebody's going to need your help, right? But at least we can do the bulk of it.
Right.
Yeah. So I see there under your name, it says Assets International. Is that your company?
Yes, that's my company.
Okay. And how many people do you have working with your organization? Where do you work? How does it work?
So we're about 14 people. Our headquarters are in the Detroit suburbs. I'm originally from Detroit. I lived there my entire life until 4 years ago. Now I live and work in Orlando. With COVID,
It's
our
warmer
company,
there.
what
It's
was that?
warmer. It's
It
warmer.
definitely is warmer there. Yes, it's. We came down here 4 years ago for what we thought was going to be 6 months, and about
Okay.
2 months into it, decided to stay. It helps that our company was already set up remotely, working up in the cloud, having people
Mhm.
working remotely here and there. So with COVID, it really obviously increased that for us.
Yeah. I think last May, I went to Fort Lauderdale for an event with a bunch of other lawyers. And the weirdest thing happened. I've never had this happen before in my life, but it was a certain temperature at 5 o'clock. And it was mind melting how hot it was. And it was humid. And then at 9 o'clock, it was hotter. And it didn't make any sense to me. The world had ended in my mind. Why is it hotter after 5 p.m.? Because I live in Northern California, where at 4 p.m. every single day, no matter what, the temperature is going to cool down because we get wind from the ocean. And in Fort Lauderdale, it was suddenly hotter. Does it happen like that in Orlando too?
We don't really get that, but it definitely is very warm to hot in the summer. People ask me, how do you handle living in Orlando during the summer? And I say, I handle it by not living in Detroit during the winter.
You could be like a good friend of mine who actually lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota during the summer, and then during the winter he lives in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh,
So
Detroit.
back and forth.
Detroit is lovely during the spring and summer. And it's not even so much the cold. It's not as bad as in Minneapolis or Chicago. Problem with Detroit in the winter is it's gray. You can go 2 weeks without seeing the sunshine.
Yeah.
And more every year, I found it affecting my mood. I love the fact that I can wear t-shirts every day throughout the year. I collect college t-shirts, and that's so I get to wear those every day, which
Yeah.
is nice.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin.
Uh,
I moved to California, but I went back and forth between Wisconsin and Minnesota every single summer for years and years. And so the thing that I really like about the Midwest is the fact that everybody's really friendly to each other
yeah.
and really helpful. Somebody says, "Hey, do you need help? Here's the keys to my garage. Go get my snowblower." You just use it whenever you need it. And you suddenly have a key to this person's home and you're thinking, "What the hell? I just met this guy named Frank. What's happening?" But then
Yeah.
in California, which is where I live now, things are very different. Neighbors don't really talk to each other that much. How is it in Florida? Are people nice to each other? Are you the guy who's like the weird guy who like talks to all his neighbors?
No, it's very chill here. That's part of what we like about it here. Not only is the weather good, but also it's very relaxed. We're in Central Florida, which I think is
Okay.
very different culturally from South Florida. South Florida, the joke is New York's sixth borough, whereas Central Florida is just a mix. You get some people who are Florida natives, but then you got a bunch of people who are just coming from all over, and it's very relaxed and friendly here.
Yeah. When I went to Fort Lauderdale with a good friend of mine, I visited her. Her name is Andrea. She's an estate attorney down there. We went to downtown Fort Lauderdale and we're walking along kind of these canals. And every maybe 30 or 40 feet, there was a different super yacht, right? And it was just a completely different world. I had never seen that before. But then Orlando and Central Florida is just completely different from that. It's almost like you drive for 2 hours and you enter a different time zone. It's like the Twilight Zone, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is
Completely.
its own metropolitan area of a million
Sure, of
people or
course.
so.
Right. Yeah. Well, what is it that made you change from being an attorney to a probate PI? Because, attorneys are, I don't know if many people know this, but attorneys are very curious people. And if they find something that's weird, they'll chase it down. And certainly I track people down all the time. But why did you become a PI guy?
So I was originally practicing law as a solo practitioner, one man operation, didn't have any support staff. doing mostly criminal defense, civil
Okay.
litigation, bankruptcy. I was doing well in terms of my cases, making a
Sure.
living as a single guy, so wasn't didn't have much overhead. And then back in 2001, an old friend of mine stumbled upon this thing called unclaimed property, which I can define if you want to.
Sure.
And we started a little side business. He was a videographer. Had my law practice, and we had a third guy who came on who was a teacher. And we all started as a little side business, and then grew it from there.
Okay. And then this actually develops for you from you as a solo contributor. That thing that I like to think about as an attorney is if there's no support staff, you kind of own a job, right? You own a firm, you certainly has value, but really you own a job. So as a solo person, you have a job, but now you actually had a business where you had partners and maybe you could get employees and you could do searches. Is that kind of how it started?
Yes. So originally, like I said, we started this company recovering unclaimed property for people.
Hmm.
Originally, it was a side hustle for all three of us from our,
Sure.
I guess we each had our own thing. After about 2 years, we said, I think there's something here, let's do full time. That's time I was marrying my now wife. And I was burning the midnight oil many nights at the office, and she was concerned. This is what it's going to be like. I'm going to be at the office till 10, 11 o'clock at night a few times a week. The joke of it is I have much more reliable hours now where she's often up working late at night while I go to sleep. But anyway, so yes, for about 2 years we went in full time, and then about a year or two after that we started hiring employees.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for
And
you.
then and it was at that point where I went in full time that I said I really enjoy this a lot more than practicing law, and it was bringing me as much money as my law practice was, but not
Mhm.
nearly as many hours, and I was getting a lot more
Yeah.
satisfaction out of it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, satisfaction from a law practice is really important if you for longevity. I've heard that a lot of attorneys are depressed. I totally get that. I try to shape my practice around the fact that I want to help people in the way that I want to help them, not in the way that I'm forced to help them. So that's why I'd stay away from litigation. Um, so you entered some notes here beforehand, and you mentioned something about your father. You know, who do you admire the most? And you said your father. So talk about him just a little bit.
So my father is 88. He'll be turning 89 in January.
Uh-huh.
He's a CPA and he still works full time. Uh, he does it because he loves it, not because he has to. He really loves doing. I mean, he's looking to transition to merging his firm and then taking on more of advisory stuff. But
Okay.
he'll never fully retire. He just loves what he does, which I admire about that. I admire the fact that he's always been a man of his word, and also that he was the managing partner of a major international firm back in the 70s through into the early 90s. So, but
Mhm.
now there's the big four accounting firms. There used to be the big eight. Their firm was
Okay.
number nine.
Okay. That's a big
And
company.
yeah, and this was before there was such thing as LLCs for professional firms like attorneys and accountants.
Right.
And some partners in some of the other offices in other cities committed major malpractice, and it brought down not only brought up down the firm, but all the partners were on the hook personally
Yeah.
for damages. And so it really hit my father in the terms of the checkbook. My father, already into his 50s, started all over again. Fortunately, he had clients who were very loyal to him, and he was able to start all over again. And but the fact that he showed that resiliency, and the fact that, like I said, he had those clients because he had proven to them that he was really good at what he did and was trustworthy.
Yeah. That's a huge deal, especially when a company goes down. There was a Anderson Tax was one of the big four a long time
Right.
ago, and they went down. And then because of malfeasance by some of the partners, and some of the partners didn't do anything wrong. Then a bunch of them got together and formed WTAS out of I don't remember where I was out of, but I interviewed with them as a young attorney. And then they've actually now rebranded as Anderson Tax again. But they were able to start over just like your dad did because essentially they had shown really good acumen and they were reliable and responsible and honest and direct. And, you know, that's great that your dad showed that because that just really shows the quality of his character, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to come through.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your transition from Detroit to Florida because that's interesting to me that you came there for just a couple of months just to try it out. You never left.
Right. So, in the spring of 2020, obviously COVID hit. After that school year ended, we decided to homeschool our kids for the following year because we
Okay.
were not happy with the options of online learning.
Yeah.
And my wife and kids are Disney fanatics. So
Okay.
we
Right.
said, we're looking around at, okay, what we're going to do for vacation with this winter. We're going to be cooped up in the house all winter. And in Orlando, there are suburbs just south of Disney called Kissimmee and Davenport. And there
Okay.
are thousands and thousands of rental homes that people own to rent out to vacationers.
Like Airbnb is being.
Yeah, but that business was in place well before Airbnb. We're talking thousands and thousands of homes in these towns. These are at that time, these landlords were struggling to rent out their houses for maybe like 10 nights a month. We
Sure.
went to them and said, what will you take for 6 months? So this is like a godsend. They don't have to worry about this. So we got an amazing deal on a big house and gated community. And we said, let's have some fun for the winter. We'll go there. We'll have our fun. And then by the spring of next year, being 21, everything will return to normal.
Okay.
So we did that and just got settled in and we had our fun. And 2 months into it, my wife, who's originally from Louisville, Kentucky, who also always wanted to live somewhere warm, we just said, what are we going back for? My parents were already snowbirds themselves, living down in Boca Raton half the year. So we're like, she doesn't have any family there. So we said, like, why don't we just stay here? The kids are happy. We're happy. We enjoy it. Like I said, my company was pretty much all remote anyways. So it didn't really matter where I was working from.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just decided to stay. It wasn't
That's
a
understandable.
long thought out process. So I got in the car and went up to Detroit and got the house ready for sale and put on the market and sold a little while later.
There you go. Outstanding. Good for you. Yeah, that reminds me of my next door neighbor, actually. So during COVID, she and her husband and family, they had two teenagers at that point. They bought an RV, not a regular RV, but like a fifth wheel to pull behind their truck.
Right.
And
Right.
he would work Monday through Wednesday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he was a handyman. So he would put in 12, 14 hours a day. And then I think she worked remotely doing some sort of finance for the government. And the kids were in school online. And so from Thursday through Sunday, every single week, they would just be gone. And some days he would work for 12 days in a row, 12, 14 days in a row, and then they would take off for an entire week and a half. And they went to some place, Central California, there's a place called the Russian River, which is a really fantastic spot to go and play and fish. And you can actually jump in this river and just ride on an inner tube down. And it's nice and it's enjoyable. And they apparently spent most of COVID by the Russian River in Central California.
That's awesome.
It's fantastic because living out of an RV, because as long as they have a satellite link or wireless, they can do it, right? It's fun.
My wife talks often about wanting to get an RV and travel for a year, but
Sure.
we have 3 teenagers and 2 big dogs and 2 cats,
Yeah,
and we both still
that's
have
a
to work.
lot.
Yeah, I could see doing it with just her once we're empty nesters,
Mhm.
but yeah, I just don't see it doing it right now when there are 5 of us. Yeah, it's too many people in too small of a space.
Yeah, I can see that too. Putting 5 people plus 2 dogs plus 2 cats, you might as well bring along rabbits and ferrets and parrots and try to like make a whole zoo, right?
We
Then
have a
you
bearded
can
dragon
step
also.
on each other. I'm sorry.
We also have a bearded dragon.
Well, you're just running the whole menagerie. Not only do
Exactly.
you have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a bearded dragon, but you have 3 teenagers that are basically animals with human skin, right?
You said it, not me.
They each had a house and home. I have two
Not that they will ever
preteens.
show any interest in hearing me talk about this. So no offense to you. They're probably never going to see this episode, but
Yeah, it's fine. No, I have I shared space with someone early in my career who was a former middle school teacher turned attorney. So Karen, if you're listening to this is about you. But she said to me one day, she said, kids are great at every age. You just have to meet them where they are because kids are different at every age, right? And so you can't say, no, my teenager is bad because they're no longer this 5-year-old angel, right? Now they're a teenager, but they're snarky and they eat too much and you get to throw things at them and, they're fun. And so, just meeting them where they are. I sat down with my daughter, she's 12, yesterday, and she was doing something on her computer. And I said, let's talk. And so we had a somewhat mature conversation until she started throwing pillows, and that was fine.
will she throw in the pillows in anger or be fun?
No, just out of fun, right? I'm the kind of dad who likes to play with my kids, even if they're older. We have at my house, we have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. We have board games. We do board games and movie nights, and we try to take a lot of trips together. We went to, I think, 3 national parks this year so far. So
Cool.
it's a good time. Yeah. I noticed here that when you did your forms here, you said that your favorite book was the Bible. Do you want to talk any about that?
So I grew up as an observant Jew. I still am, and so the Bible is the book. It's not just a book; it's the book
Yeah, it's a library, right? That's what it means. Bible means library, right?
right. So because there's so much in it that you can read, especially if you go to a what's called a yeshiva, a where Jews study.
Yep.
There are shelves and shelves of books. There are always new commentaries, and I
Mhm.
read through the 5 books of Moses every year. We reread it on an annual basis
Uh-huh.
throughout the year, and then we start all over again. And just recently, I read something like, I've read this now how many times in my life, and I go, I never really thought about that before. I don't remember what specifically it was, but
Yep.
like a question arose in my mind. Now, I never thought about that way, and there's so much wisdom and guidance that comes, not just in terms of being religious, but also the relationship you have with other people
Right.
and with the world.
It hits you at different times at different ages. So I was raised Jewish. That's why my name's Elijah. And so I'm Christian now, but I teach Sunday school. And so in when teaching, I always try to explain to people you have to read your scriptures again and again and again,
Mhm.
because no matter how many times you read them, you're in a different stage at your life. And so you have to learn them differently. There's a proverb that I read a long time ago, and it didn't hit me the same way as it did after I graduated from law school. And it says the borrower is slave to the lender. And I never understood that until my wife and I were in almost $500,000 in debt.
Mhm.
And that really struck home. The borrower is the slave to the lender. And so we really buckled down. Man, did we buckle down for years. We didn't go out to eat. Netflix was our entire entertainment budget. We just decided to get the heck out because the
Yeah.
words in the scriptures they're filled with wisdom. They really are. It's just wise words. Whether you believe it or not, I don't think that matters. I think what matters is that if you read wisdom somewhere, I just want to try to absorb as much wisdom as I can. Yeah.
I do remember now what the question of that came up, if I may share. In this past week's portion, it talks about the Abraham is just recovering from having the circumcision
Right.
that forms as his covenant with God as a Jew. And it says the 3 angels come to visit him, and each angel had a specific job. One was to one was just to heal him and make him feel better. One was to basically tell Sarah that she was going to have a baby a year later. And the third one was to go on and to destroy the city of Sodom and
Okay.
Gomorrah as view.
Mhm. Yep.
And the question is, wait a minute, why did that third one have to come? Why did he go there? Why did he just go straight to Sodom and deal with it there?
Yep.
And the reason is because before he dealt with the punishment of people violating the laws of what they're doing in Sodom, he first had to meet the angel. God still wanted the angel to meet Abraham first, so that he could see Abraham being a kind person, that even when he was in pain, in this massive pain from the surgery, and they didn't have anesthesia back then,
Yeah, they did.
that he was sitting in the hot sun, begging God to send him people that he could show hospitality to.
Yeah.
And it was important lesson even for the angels to learn, is that before you start meting out justice, you first have to learn about compassion.
Yeah. Mercy. Yeah. I remember someone asked me, how do you become Jewish? And I said, you have to go talk to your rabbi and you have to ask several times and they're supposed to turn you away. And
Well, that's if you're not born Jewish. Yeah.
yeah. And that's a merciful thing, right? Where essentially it's very difficult in certain denominations of Judaism to be Jewish. And so they're supposed to turn people away because it's the merciful thing. Don't become a covenant person, covenant people. It is too hard.
Part of
Then,
it is also Judaism is a religion of rules, and you got to be careful about someone joining the faith without being able to fully do that. But also, we don't believe that if someone's not Jewish, they won't have a place in heaven. It was a very different view about other religions,
yeah,
distinct from a lot of other religions. We believe that there are righteous people and heaven bound people, even if they are
of
not
course.
Jewish.
Of course, I believe much the same thing. People have their own relationship with deity, and
Yes.
there are really good people who don't believe what I believe, and that's fine. You know,
Yeah.
I view my reason for being on earth as to absorb as much truth as I possibly can, and I try to find it wherever I can. And there are some people who are really good at one piece of that truth, and there are other people who are not so good at that piece, but they're good at another piece. And so I try to listen to as many different things as I can. One of my favorite books that I'm reading right now is called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I don't know if you've read that book.
No.
It's a marketing book. This professor went, and for 4 years, he took entry-level positions in sales organizations that were highly successful to learn how they actually operate. And so he got training from them, and then he's a psychologist. So he took apart the psychology of all of those different sales organizations, not just the ones that were pretty good, ones that are the top performing in the country. And he took them apart and started explaining all the different research that it actually works and explained to people, this is how to do it. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's
I'll check
fascinating.
that out.
Yeah, even if you're not a marketing or a salesperson, it's fascinating just to see that it's actually a study of how people interrelate to each other based upon their relationship and their perceived value. It's outstanding reading for anyone, really.
Sounds cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Michael, it's been really nice to talk to you today. Did you have any kind of parting words, anything you'd like people to know, or how can they find you?
If, like I said, if you're in that situation, you're handling an estate and you cannot find heirs or beneficiaries, let me know. You can find me at assetsinternational.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as Elijah. I'm pretty active on there. And those are probably the two easiest ways to reach me. I'll give you an email address is mzwick, so my first initial last name, at assetsinternational.com. We also do asset searches where someone has died and taken all the information about their assets to the grave. We'll step in, we'll try to figure out what we can about the deceased, and then see what the assets are out there, and then do the legwork to get those assets turned over.
That's really good. I'm glad that you do that because not a lot of people do. Just in case anyone's wondering, my firm uses private investigators time. I didn't know that Michael's firm did asset searches, so he definitely will go on my Rolodex as someone that I can specifically utilize for that service, because it's very difficult to find assets when someone has died if they haven't kept a list. So for anyone who's listening, if you want to do one favor to your family members, make a list of all your stuff. Really. If you don't want to do a will, you don't want to do a trust, you don't want to do anything, that's fine. Just make a stupid list. Write down everything in your head, because when you are unconscious, your brain cannot be used anymore. So all that information is gone.
I always say do an inventory of assets. You don't necessarily have to put down the amounts. You don't tell people like how much you have in your brokerage account or your checking account. Just tell them what institution, the account numbers, whatever, and make sure, obviously, to update that list every however many months, but also to make sure that someone can have access to it, because it doesn't do any good if it's you have it encrypted on your computer, nobody can get to it.
Absolutely good advice. Same advice comes from my office every single day. Michael, it's been great talking to you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening to The Keys to Your Legacy. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, wherever else you can find podcasts. And we'll see you next time. Follow along so that we can help you protect the keys to your legacy.
You've been tuning into The Keys to Your Legacy with your host, Elijah Keys. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, keyslawgroup.com. Thank you for your positive